It's tough to expect Asian Americans, but also others, to feel comfortable being affectionate when that isn't something that is in our purview of behaviors. We haven't had a lot of practice around that. And so we're much more comfortable showing affection through action. Similarly, a lot of our parents, they're not verbally expressive, and it can lead to resentment growing up. We think our parents didn't love us in the way we wanted them to, but they did the best they could. Our parents, they love us in acts of silent service and sacrifice. And that's also why so many of us give at the expense of ourselves, because we're raised to give at the expense of ourselves.
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's married with 3 kids, I know how much parenthood could change a marriage. If flirting, laughing, and having fun together feels like a thing of the past, then I'm here to teach you that marriage doesn't have to feel so hard with your parents, and your marriage can thrive even when you're in the season of raising kids. Whether you're in a good place in your marriage and you just want to continue growing together, or you're wondering if you even like your spouse anymore, this podcast has something for you. Join me here each week as we dive into what it takes to help your marriage grow, and maybe even do a 180. You'll learn ways to handle conflict better, bring that spark back into your relationship, as well as learn how to improve other areas of your life from my lovely guest experts. Are you ready for the next stage of your life in marriage? Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood Podcast. Today, I'm so thrilled to have my new friend here, Dr. Stacey Litam, because I have not really touched on this topic that we're going to dive into today much at all. And it's about time, okay? Because as you could see, or if you know me, I am Asian American. More specifically, my family's from Hong Kong, so I'm Hong Kong American, which means my family speaks Cantonese. And growing up American, but culturally Chinese, specifically Cantonese, has had its challenges. And luckily, I grew up in the Bay Area of California, so I was surrounded by all kinds of people, all kinds of Cantonese people, but also, Caucasian people, the African American community, and all that. But I know that my guest here, Dr. Stacey Litam, did not have that experience. She grew up in the Midwest. And so our experiences of growing up with immigrant parents is probably vastly different because of our environment that we were born and raised into. And so I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Stacey here and talk more about this in hopes that those of you who can relate to this experience or want to learn more about this experience of your fellow community members, that you feel seen, or you come out of this feeling like, okay, I am not crazy, or my struggles are there for a reason. And hopefully you can find a way to navigate them better from listening to this episode and learning more from Dr. Stacey. So Dr. Stacey is a professor, a licensed professional clinical counselor, also the author of an incredible book that I'm excited to dive into called Patterns That Remain, A Guide to Healing for Asian Children of Immigrants. Now, I know this is going to be centered around the Asian American experience, but I'm sure that a lot of what we're going to discuss today can resonate with you if you also have immigrant parents of a different culture. Okay, so thank you so much for being here, Dr. Stacey. I love that we got connected. I love what you do and the work and the people that you support. Can you please share with us where you live, how old your kids are, and what led you to specialize in supporting this community and writing your book?
Thank you, Michelle. I so appreciate your invitation to join you on this podcast. I am based very firmly in the Midwest. So I am in Cleveland, Ohio, and I have 2 sons at the time of recording. One is 4 and one is 2. So what brought me to do this work broadly around Asian American mental health, around generational trauma, and also around raising bicultural children was really because I wanted my children to have a very different experience than the one that I had growing up. So just like you mentioned, being culturally Chinese, culturally Asian American, but living in a predominantly white Eurocentric world, I find that it felt like I was always in the hyphen. I wasn't Asian enough to be considered Filipina or Chinese, because I didn't speak the language fluently. And I wasn't white enough to be considered really American because of the way that I looked, the way that maybe I dressed, or the food that I ate. And so, sort of learning to navigate this positionality of not quite this, not quite that, like many of us, it can lead to increased mental health, depression, anxiety, insecure attachments in our relationships. And I really wanted to make sure that my kids would have a very different experience.
Oh my gosh, yes. It is such a confusing experience growing up that way. Again, not feeling enough of one or enough of the other, and kind of feeling like you're living in the in between where you don't quite belong, except for the people that can relate to you, right? Like your fellow Asian American friends who also experience that. But even there is like a wide spectrum, right? There are people whose parents moved over much later and are more deeply ingrained with not assimilating. And then for me, my dad came over later, but my mom came over when she was 7. So she is kind of like losing her cultural and language, like I don't even know what you call that, but like she's still clinging on to it. But because she spent more time here than there, you can tell, right? And then, of course, my kids are half white.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, right? It's like, well, my Cantonese has severely declined because my mom remarried a Japanese American guy and we didn't want to be rude. So we stopped speaking it as much.
Mm.
And then my husband doesn't understand beyond like the few food words or whatever. And so I find myself mostly, probably 99% of what I say to my kids is English, right? That's what we speak because that's our shared language in the home.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I so much want them to be proud of being Cantonese and sharing the culture that they belong to also. But it's like, it's difficult because everything else around us is teaching them to be this other way, which there are some differences, right? So I want to dive into that and your experiences and what you share in the book of what it's like to grow up with immigrant parents and how that has affected us as a community when we become adults and how that manifests in our relationships, how we parent. So can we dive into that a little bit?
Absolutely. And this is such a good question. I wish we could have this discussion for like 5 hours because there's so much here. There's so much to unpack, and the nuance of what it means to grow up with immigrant parents also looks different based on when our families immigrated, how assimilated or enculturated they are, and then also the meaning we make about being an immigrant or having immigrant parents. I will say that broadly, those of us who have immigrant parents, we tend to experience love from childhood in the form of transaction, right? The messages we hear early on are things like, I came to this country for you. The least you could do is get straight A's. Or I sacrificed my career for you. So the least you could do is pick me up from the airport. And so we begin to understand love through the lens of transaction. My parents did this for me, and so I have to do that. So, how does that impact us in adulthood? Well, we tend to become people who quantify our value based on our productivity. We think if I'm not successful, if I don't accomplish these things, then I'm going to fall behind. My parents won't be proud, or I've disappointed them in some way. And in some example, this is really helpful. It can drive career success, it can drive accomplishments, but it also can contribute to things like burnout and self-abandonment. And then as we enter into adult relationships, we fall into that same habit of transactionality. This is why it's very difficult sometimes for us to just accept love and kindness without immediately wanting to say, okay, how do I return the favor? So sometimes when I come home from work at the end of a night, I'm exhausted, I have nothing left to give. And when I walk through those doors, my husband is washing the dishes, he's mopping the floor, he's cleaning the kitchen. And instead of saying, oh, thank you, I feel so protected in this space, I immediately go to, okay, what can I do to reciprocate? what do I have to clean? How can I show my gratitude by evening the playing field and keeping score? And so we grow up to become people that really struggle to accept our value and our worth independent of productivity. And we really struggle to accept love and kindness without trying to keep score.
Oh my gosh, yes. I feel like, I mean, I'm very curious if there's a study done for like if Asians were to have taken the five love languages quiz, what percentage would come out as acts of service being the dominant love language? Because that is a thing, right? I was just talking to my
No,
client about like,
actually, it's not a thing. It's not a thing. And this is why the five love languages are not actually evidence based. Someone made them up.
right.
They're also grounded in Eurocentric, individualistic perspectives that are not considering queer relationships or collectivistic cultures like Asian Americans. This is why acts of service, quality time, words of affirmation, they feel good, but none of them really feel like they hit home for us. So
Mm.
that's why my book is an actual evidence based approach to a love language for our community. So I propose an entirely new love language about what we need as a community collectivistically, both Asian American, Black American, Latino American, to feel truly connected and seen in a way that just isn't captured by the five love languages.
Yeah, and I saw somewhere on your Instagram profile the Venn diagram of the individualistic, the collectivistic, and then there's the escapism, right? And I
Mhm.
loved that because so much of Asian culture is community. Like that is how the social construct is created. Is it's very much communal based, and I love that. And when I saw that diagram, I immediately thought of, uh-oh, there's a little bit of a fine line there because I know with moms specifically, we are constantly giving,
Mhm.
giving, giving to the point where we're not really taking a look at what is our capacity and what actually gives back to us so that we
Mhm.
have that capacity to continue doing the work that we want to do or we feel like we need to do because of our responsibility or guilt or whatever it is. I would love for you to touch on that.
Mhm.
So, like, given that in Asian culture, we do get something out of supporting other people and being there for people.
Mhm.
But how do we know when it's to our detriment that we're doing that?
Hmm. Yeah. So again, really good question, Michelle. And also, I'm so sorry that I came in so hot with the love languages. It's like a point
No,
of
I love it.
contention for me.
I love it.
So many of my clients and students will report how it just doesn't seem to capture what they
Yeah.
need in connection. But your question around how do we know whether we're giving to our own detriment? I think this looks different for every parent and every
Mm-hmm.
mother. And I think you can feel it in your bones. You'll feel that sense of exhaustion. You'll feel that sense of sometimes resentment that we're expected to do this or carry this labor or engage in this burden. And we're no longer feeling that sense of purpose or that it's rewarding in any way. So we find ourselves in this place of deep emotional and spiritual exhaustion. Now it's time to check in. Now it's time to consider whether we are giving to others at the expense of ourselves. Is it time for us to take a break, go on a walk, eat something healthful, drink water? What do we need in this moment to feel more connected to ourselves? Because until we are connected to ourselves, it's really tough to connect meaningfully with others. So there's sort of an awareness of how am I feeling in this moment? And then what do I need in this moment to get grounded in ways that leverage connection?
Yes, thank you for saying that because just because we live in Western society or Eurocentric society, where it's very much centered around take care of you, it's all like, how does this affect me? Versus in Asian culture, it's like, how do I affect other people, right?
Mhm.
And I don't want people listening to be like, oh, that means like I can't give back to myself. I shouldn't be quote unquote selfish and take care of myself. And I do find that to come up a lot with clients of mine who are Asian American or Asian period. And they're like, well, I'm supposed to do all these things and I don't have time to take care of myself. It's
Mm,
not important. It's okay. As long as other people are fine, I'll be fine. And I want to like just make clear that yes, you do get something out of serving others. And it's also important that you're taking care of yourself because that only gives you more to be able to give to others. So if
mhm.
like that's your focus, don't burn yourself out for the sake of, oh, I owe people things.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there's a lot of research to support what you're saying, Michelle. The ways in which the mother takes care of her body. So when children witness her exercising, moving her body, being physical, and the way in which women also are present in the workplace when they come home and they connect with their kids upon return, those are such important predictive factors for the way children approach their own bodies and approaches to wellness and their level of motivation as they grow into adults. So that means that giving ourselves permission to stretch in the morning, do yoga, find time to go to the gym, or do what body weight exercises around the house and do it with your kids. That role modeling in our ability to care for ourselves intentionally is so important for kids to see this, and then they're more likely to incorporate that as they grow up compared to when they see dad doing it, for instance.
That's very interesting. So mom has more influence over how they nurture their own
Yes, their food
individual self.
habits, their individual self, and their approaches to physical health and activity.
Ooh, okay, mamas, are you hearing this? Okay, so there is evidence that this is true. And
Mhm.
I know like the moms are the first to abandon their own needs for the sake of caring for others. And so if you want your kids to have healthy habits growing up, which I know we all do, right? We often put their needs above our own. Now you know that what we model to them is even more important, right? I talk about how it is so good for you to model healthy relationships. Well, it's also good for you to model healthy relationship with yourself, which
Mhm.
involves the physical, the mental, emotional, spiritual, all of the things.
Yes. And also the
That's
way that we talk to ourselves and the way that we
absolutely.
talk about food. I think about as Asian Americans, I can speak for myself, the way that the women in my family have modeled relationship with food has been pretty problematic. We'll be at family parties and they'll say, you're so skinny, you've lost so much weight, you look great. And then later on, they'll say, you're eating too much, there's too much food on your plate, you're getting fat. And so the way that we talk about food as Asian Americans, but also among other communities, it can be really challenging to break those habits. And so I find that, with my own kids, I'll break it down, to like everything in moderation, including moderation, like fat keeps you satisfied, protein keeps you full, carbs give you energy, fruits and vegetables give you vitamins. And so it becomes less about good and bad food and about what each food does and the purpose
Yes.
it serves.
Yes. And that is such a mental effort
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't come natural to us because we didn't grow up with that language. And I find myself having to really think about like checking myself whenever I'm like, oh, she or he is like, oh, that's a lot, or it's too little, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's been so much emphasis put on the physical in Asian culture. Like I grew up with the same commentary from family all the time, going to family parties, like Lunar New Year is coming up. And so I'm now seeing posts like how to navigate Lunar New Year and like kind of set boundaries with what people say to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it is truly a mental effort to focus on the functionality of what we're putting in our body and not shaming them for wanting to eat what we have grown up to label as junk food. I call it
Mm-hmm.
now fun food.
Oh,
So
I
we've
love
got to have
that.
growing food and fun food. But like if you want fun food, we've got to eat our growing food first. And then
Mm,
you could have your fun food. So I don't want it to be like, oh, I can't have ice cream at all ever. It's like, no, but like, let's make sure we're fueling our bodies in the best way
mm,
and then go and have a treat, right? Because I do know that there's evidence where if we restrict something a lot, that just makes them want it more, right?
mhm,
It's like being
mhm.
told you can't do something. Well, watch me. I'm going to go
Right.
do it.
I love that fun food and growing food. I think that's so thoughtful and approaches it with such compassion.
Yeah, it's been really helpful to have that kind of language. And I'm just so glad that there are people like you breaking these things down and giving language to what so many of us have had trouble articulating, or just like even understanding, having that level of awareness of like what we're experiencing that is so difficult for us to kind of like navigate in this world.
Hmm.
So I kind of want to talk about growing up with immigrant parents,
Hmm.
right? With my parents' experience, it's like they came here and it's like work hard, 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 save, 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 right? To the point where my mom, she just retired last year and she's just now enjoying her life. Like she is not someone who could
Hmm.
sit down and relax.
Hmm.
Like my memory of her growing up is she's always doing something, always, always. And she rarely played with us. If it was like after dinner, we would play card games before bed. But beyond that, like I can't remember a time where she's like playing Barbies with me or playing imaginary with me.
Hmm.
And that explains so much about how I internally struggle when my kids want to play unstructured ways. And I'm like, I don't know how to do this. Give me a board game and I can play with you. I need some
Hmm.
boundaries or some kind of goal to hit, right? But it's
Yeah.
like, let's play Tea Party. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like gritting my teeth, like, when is this over? Oh my gosh, it's only been 5 minutes. But
Hmm.
I kind of hate that I have difficulty with being present and allowing them to just have free play with me involved.
Hmm.
Happy for my mom that she's like traveling all over the world right now. She's like in New Zealand right now. And I'm like, I love this for her. And I just know how much that affected me because it wasn't till, I don't know, the last 5 to 7 years, which is probably in line with me in my coaching career, actually, where I finally realized no, I need time to relax because I will hit my limit and blow up on my family, which is not what I want to do, right? I
Hmm.
don't want to be irritable. I want to be present. I want to have the capacity to handle the moments when they're having big feelings, not be told, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about, which is something I heard very often,
Hmm.
right? So, can we talk about that and like how we're having to unlearn what we grew up with to shift how we parent? Because obviously, that's what we grew up with. We didn't like how that felt. And now we're wanting to do something different, but we don't have an example of how to do that.
Hmm. First, I just want to thank you for your vulnerability and sharing that the idea of unstructured play feels really challenging. It doesn't feel natural. And that's something that I also resonate with. My children will say, I want to play dinosaurs. And I'm like, okay, like, well, what do the dinosaurs want to do? And they're like, no, they just run around. And I'm like, run where? So that feeling of needing that goal and that drive to do something is so deeply embedded in us because of the way we were raised and the way that our immigrant parents, in many cases, were able to come to this country because they were able to complete tasks, be successful in goal. You think about, those of us who immigrated here after the 1965 Hart-Celler Act. That act prioritized immigrants from Asian countries and others who were able to be specialized professions, or doctors, lawyers, engineers. So we have a whole community of folks, a whole generation of folks who are so goal driven, and that's what has resulted in their success. So those are the skills that were modeled to us in our parents. And so when it comes to us being parents, without that goal, we haven't learned to just be present. And it is so difficult. What I found is that we can try all day. We can try all day to sit and be unstructured, but there are a lot of different ways to play, and there are a lot of different ways to be a mother. And we can be successful, amazing, loving mothers in other ways, like teaching them skills or unloading the dishwasher together. My kids think that's so much fun. They'll hand me a plate. We'll say big plate, small plate, big spoon, small spoon, and they get to pick which ones they do first. Or, we'll do other kinds of games with paints or coloring pads. And that, though it is somewhat unstructured, that feels better for me. And
Mm-hmm.
luckily, my husband's really great at the unstructured play. So I think there's a bit of a balance that we can just honor and recognize that might not be our strong suit, but there are so many other things that we are skilled at that our children can learn and feel connected with us through.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so glad you said that because that got me thinking. I was like, actually, yeah, I like to cook with them because it's a huge thing in Chinese culture to like eat your vitamins, right? Like through food. And so anytime anyone's sick in the family, I am making soup, right? Like not the
Mm.
canned soup. I'm making soup from scratch with ingredients that have medicinal properties for the sake of boosting their immunity. And so like I'm very into making sure that I give my family healthy, wholesome meals.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, the artwork, like for some reason, that is more okay than
Mhm.
just like you said, playing with dinosaurs, or in my case, like my son's like Hot Wheel tracks. I'm like, okay, how many times are we gonna do
Mhm.
this?
But that's still play,
Yeah.
cooking with kids, that's play. And art,
Yes.
that's play. With children, everything is play. I think that it's easy for us not to label it as play because it seems less obvious, but the child's whole world is play. And we just get to be part of it. And as long as we're present in it, that's play. And so I
That's
think
true.
approaching it with compassion can be helpful for those of us who are mothers or parents who think, I can't really do the unstructured piece because there's a lot of ways we can play.
Yes, I love that. Another thing that I recently came across, so I think it was another podcast you did. You were mentioning something about like affection, and I found that to be very fascinating because so that for those who don't know what I'm talking about, it's very common for Asians to not do public displays of affection or any like physical form like holding hands or kissing in front of other people. I love you is also something that's not really said across the board. I don't think my mom has ever said it to me. Not to say she doesn't love me, but she shows it in different ways through
Hmm.
supporting us financially or doing things for us or making food for us and like all that. And so you had mentioned how different it is to grow up not having any of that and
Hmm.
then kind of being confused about how to navigate your own romantic relationships. And I so can relate.
Hmm.
I remember very vividly, I went to my now husband's house when he still lived with his parents, and I saw his parents sitting on the couch and they were cuddling. And I was like, that is so, why are you doing that? Like, don't you know you have company? Like, I don't understand what's happening. And only to like now become this version of myself where I'm like telling my kids I love them constantly, multiple times a day, kissing them, hugging them. And I'm like, who am I? Right. So I kind of wanted to dive into that for those who are like, yeah, I struggle with the physical aspect of affection because I
Hmm.
wasn't modeled that growing up, or I struggle with communicating verbally that I love my partner and my partner wants that, but I'm just having trouble doing that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think you said it beautifully, Michelle. It's tough to expect our community, Asian Americans, but also others, to feel comfortable being affectionate when that isn't something that is in our purview of behaviors. We haven't been role modeled that, we haven't had a lot of practice around that. And so we tend to have much more practice in giving and acting and serving. So, like you said, you are the go to make soup when your kids or your husband are sick, and making sure that they're eating healthful foods, and making sure that they're cooking with you and you're being really intentional in the way you act with them. Those are all ways that we're much more comfortable showing affection. It's through action. Similarly, a lot of our parents, they're not verbally expressive, and it can lead to resentment growing up. We think our parents didn't love us in the way we wanted them to, but they did the best they could. They showed love by making sure that we had food on our plates, a roof over our head, clothes on our back. I sort of jokingly tell the story about my dad. I can count on four fingers how many times my dad has said, I love you, but I've lost track of all the times he's asked me, what do you need from Costco?
Mm.
So our parents, they love us in service, in acts of silent service and sacrifice. And so we learn to express love through silent service and sacrifice. That's also why so many of us give at the expense of ourselves, because we're raised to give at the expense of ourselves.
Yeah.
So, how do we overcome that? How do we learn to accept love and explore how it feels to be affectionate and to verbalize that? Well, first, I think honoring the fact that it might never feel truly natural, and that's okay. And to just keep the lines of communication open with our partners and ask them, what do you need to feel loved? How connected do you feel with me? What can I do differently to bridge that gap? And ask for specific bids for connection. So when our partner says, hey, I want to tell you a story about what happened at work, to turn toward our partner instead of, being distracted with whatever is coming up in that moment.
Yeah, I think where we often kind of fall into a trap of like, but I'm doing those things is when it's too general of a request, right? Like, I want you to show me that you care about me. That's very different across the board, right? Like, if you say it to my parents, I'd be like, I do show you I care about you. I cut you fruit whenever you come over.
Mhm.
Um, or, like, I'm always asking you, what can I buy for you? I'm going to this store, like your Costco example, right? Like, that is like, yep, that's very true and relatable.
Mhm.
But people need to learn through your own awareness of yourself. Like, that's how we help them help us. And that's true for marriage. That's true for every single relationship you care about. You have to let them know. You can't just like expect them to read your mind or know, because their interpretation of caring or love can be vastly different because they need something different. Or maybe they're not even aware that there's different options because of how they grew up. They just think that, oh, caring means these 5 things. But what
Mhm.
if there's 100 ways and they just need more options to know about? So I love that you brought that up, because that is something that I know a lot of like biracial couples deal with and navigate. And they're like, I don't know, is this just a cultural difference that we can't overcome? No, not necessarily, right? Part of this is, are you willing to meet your partner where they're at and vice
Mhm.
versa? Can you take baby steps? I think any effort
Mhm.
that you can show that you are trying is going to speak volumes, because they know that you're coming from somewhere completely different than where they're at. Like, can you just like with a switch do what they want? Maybe not, but maybe it's a matter of like, well, I would really want you to be able to hold my hand. Maybe it starts off in the car touching hands. Maybe it starts
Mhm.
off as something smaller, right? There are ways that you can show you're intentionally trying to make an effort to become more comfortable with
Mhm.
doing something that feels so foreign.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that example you give with a partner who perhaps is more physically affectionate than maybe we're comfortable with, a question that I like to ask folks is, if you could share one specific act of physical touch that feels most connecting, what is that? So maybe it's, a partner who says, I really feel connected to you when we snuggle in bed, or I love holding hands in the car, or I love when you put your head on my shoulder when we're watching TV. So find one or two specific examples of when your partner feels especially connected in whatever way that feels kind of new, and then commit to doing those. Because if we just guess, our partner loves physical affection, maybe we're doing a couple things, but that's not the specific examples that really are connecting. So ask our partner, right? What do you need? What are the specific moments where you feel most connected with me? And then like double down to do those more intentionally.
Yeah, it's kind of like a cheat code, right? Just
Mhm.
ask them. If they want something specific, they can let you know. Maybe they didn't know that you needed that level of a specific request to be made. And
Mhm.
yes, it might feel manufactured at first where you're kind of forcing yourself, but know that over time it may feel more and more familiar and comfortable, to the point where then you're like, oh, if I'm okay with doing this, maybe I can do this as well. So don't feel like you are the way you are and you're locked into that way forever. But also, if you do struggle with that, share with them what about that act, that
Mm.
request that they have that makes you really uncomfortable, so that you guys can kind of work through that. Maybe you guys can get creative about finding a different way that still accomplishes that same effect until you are open to trying that other way in the future, or maybe not at all, right? It's all about honoring both individuals, but the end goal is you want to show that you love your partner in the way that they can receive it, right? So
Yes.
it's not always about, well, this is how I love and that's it. Well, if it only worked that way, right? But it doesn't. We do need to take our partner into consideration.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Can you tell us more about your book so that those who are like, okay, I need to learn more from Dr. Stacey. I love how this conversation has unfolded and I want to understand better about my own experience so that I can kind of navigate life as an Asian American more aware, also more grounded,
Mm,
just because I feel like that's, for me, that's true. Is like when I can grasp or get a better grasp of what it is that I actually experience and what I'm continuing to experience, and someone has been able to beautifully package it up in an articulate way, that helps me feel more seen and helps me understand myself more.
mm-hmm.
Can you share more about what your book is about and who it's for?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for asking. So, my book is really for everyone. It's a love language to our Asian American community. But I would say, interestingly, most of the folks that I hear from who read the book and loved it aren't just Asians. They're white folks, they're African American or Black, they're Indigenous, they're Latino. And so, there's something in the book I think that resonates with all people. The book combines storytelling, history, and research to provide a practical framework to heal diasporic wounds, break generational trauma, and then strengthen relationships. So it's a lot of storytelling from different folks across the entire country who share stories about what it was like for them growing up as an Asian American, what it was like for them finding love and keeping that love, and how to find a deeper connection as a person, a parent, and a partner. And so all of these strategies are in there: how to strengthen relationships, how to communicate with care, how to operate from abundance instead of letting scarcity mindsets drive you. So if any of those topics sound interesting, you can get Patterns That Remain wherever books are sold: Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and etc.
Amazing. Thank you so much. All right. For those of you who love this conversation, go check out Stacey. Where is the best place for them to connect with you?
You can email me at stacy@stacylitam.com. Check out my website, stacylitam.com. Follow me on Instagram, Dr. Stacey, STACEYALITAM on Instagram, or find me on LinkedIn.
Love it. And then be sure to go grab her book. It's also available on audiobook. I know I'm grabbing that as soon as we get off this recording so that I can dive into that because I'm excited to learn more. All right. For those of you who know someone that could benefit from listening to this episode, please share this with them. Better yet, tag us in your stories on Instagram and we'll give you a shout out. If you love this show, thank you so much for being here and listening. Please consider leaving a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That's what helps the show grow and helps more people like you get the help that they need. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you again, Dr. Stacey, and I'll catch you all back here on the next episode. Bye. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please send me a message over on Instagram at Michelle Perta Coaching to let me know what you loved most about it. Hearing from my listeners is my absolute favorite. And if you've been loving this podcast, please leave a rating and review. This will help people like you find the show and get the help they need. Catch you here on the next episode. Bye.